I was just an engineer, working night shifts in the metro, nothing unusual. Until the new station I inspected started announcing trains that hadn't existed for decades. The deeper I went, the clearer it became, something down there was still alive. And now, it knows my name. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the Bed. It happened in 2022, in the city's new underground extension. The metro authorities had been proud to announce the opening of a brand new line, modern, silent, efficient. They called the last station Podzemna 13. Most people didn't know that years ago, the same place had been an old cemetery that was relocated during construction. Mark, a 37-year-old electrical engineer, was sent there for a final night inspection before the official launch. He had worked in the metro system for over 10 years, calm, rational, the kind of man who believed every sound had a reason and every shadow could be explained by poor lighting. It was late, almost 1 a.m., when he arrived. The escalators were still, the station half-lit. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of concrete dust and something faintly metallic. He swiped his card through the control gate, and the sound of the turnstile echoed down the empty hall like a whisper that didn't belong to him. He radioed the control room. Station Podzemna 13, entering inspection zone. No response, just static. Mark checked the schedule. No trains were supposed to be running that night. He began his route, first the platform, then the service tunnels. Everything looked clean, precise, perfect. Only the silence felt wrong, too deep, as if the place itself was holding its breath. He reached the platform edge, shining his flashlight along the rails. That's when he heard it, a faint metallic clang, distant, rhythmic, like someone tapping iron with a small hammer. He waited. It came again, closer this time, echoing through the tunnel. "Control, do you copy?" he called again. Still no answer. He crouched near the edge, listening. The sound stopped completely. Then, from the darkness ahead, a low hum began to rise, not mechanical, but human, a voice murmuring something too quiet to make out. Mark felt a shiver crawl up his back. He told himself it was just wind in the ventilation ducts. He turned on his headlamp and stepped into the service corridor leading toward the maintenance area. The corridor stretched longer than he remembered. Each step echoed twice, once for him, and once for something behind him. When he stopped, the echo stopped half a second later. He turned quickly, light sweeping over the walls, nothing. Just gray tiles, cables, dust. At the end of the passage stood a metal door labeled E17, technical access only. It was slightly open. Mark frowned, he had locked it himself 2 days earlier. He pushed it open with a creak. Inside was a small chamber filled with electrical panels and security monitors. On one of the screens, static flashed. Then, for less than a second, an image appeared, a dark silhouette standing between the rails, motionless, head tilted as if watching. Mark blinked, stepped closer. The figure vanished. The camera returned to normal, an empty tunnel, perfectly still. He replayed the footage, nothing there. He rewound again, blank. His pulse quickened, though he tried to stay calm. He noted it in his inspection log, camera 4 malfunction, possible interference. Then the lights above flickered, one by one, as if something was moving through the tunnel below. He decided to finish the checklist quickly and leave. The last item was the breaker panel near the southern exit. He walked along the deserted platform again, trying not to look into the dark tunnel mouth, though his eyes kept drifting there. As he passed the bench near the middle of the platform, a faint sound made him freeze, footsteps on the tiles behind him. Slow, deliberate, matching his rhythm. He turned instantly. Empty. Only the soft hum of the fluorescent lights and the echo of his own breath. Mark forced a laugh under his breath. Get a grip, man. It's just the acoustics. He finished the inspection, wrote a short report on a clipboard, and headed toward the escalator. As he reached for the main switch to shut down the lights, a voice came through the station's old speaker system, a distorted male voice repeating. Next train arriving, track 2. Mark's hand stopped midair. The monitors showed no incoming train. The line wasn't even powered. Yet from deep inside the tunnel, he heard it, the unmistakable rumble of wheels on steel, growing louder, closer, faster. He aimed his flashlight toward the darkness. The sound passed right through the station, invisible, then faded into silence. When it was gone, the lights returned to normal. The loudspeakers clicked off. Only Mark stood there, frozen, trying to decide if he had imagined the whole thing. He took a shaky breath, closed his logbook, and walked toward the exit without looking back. That night, he didn't mention it to anyone. Not to the supervisor, not even to his closest coworker. But before leaving, he slipped the security recording from camera 4 onto a flash drive, just in case someone needed proof that he hadn't been alone on that platform. 2 nights later, Mark was back at Podzemna 13. The metro line was set to open within a week, and his supervisor wanted every system checked twice. Mark hadn't told anyone about what happened on the first night, the voice on the speaker, the phantom train. He convinced himself it had been stress, fatigue, or a glitch in the sound system. Still, when he descended the escalator at 11:45 p.m., a knot tightened in his stomach. The station was as empty as before. Only the soft buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant hum of the ventilation system filled the air. He placed his thermos on the bench, unfolded the inspection log, and began his usual round. The first thing he noticed was the faint smell of burning plastic near the control booth. He opened the panel, no overheating, no damage. But the speaker system flickered on by itself. A distorted, hollow announcement echoed through the hall. "Attention, next stop. Detroit." Then silence. Mark froze. He knew that name, Detroit, was short for Sviatotroitska, an old metro station shut down decades ago after a tunnel collapse. It wasn't even on the current network map. He'd seen it once in an old archive file, a forgotten piece of history. He tried the intercom to contact control. Only static. Then another sound came through, a faint whisper, like a voice caught between 2 frequencies. "Don't go down there." The voice was clear for only a moment before dissolving into white noise. Mark switched off the speakers, his pulse pounding. He took a deep breath, grabbed his flashlight, and went into the service corridor that led toward the lower ventilation shaft. The corridor walls were damp, marked by gray stains that hadn't been there before. Water dripped rhythmically from the ceiling, echoing down the long concrete passage. Halfway through, a movement caught his eye, a shadow passing behind one of the maintenance doors. He stopped, listened. Silence. He turned the handle, opened the door slowly. The small storage room inside was empty, just old tools, spare wiring, and dust. Yet the air felt heavier, colder. His breath came out white. He backed away and closed the door. As he turned off his flashlight for a second to adjust it, he realized something unsettling. There was a faint, pulsating glow coming from under the floor grating. He crouched and looked closer. Between the metal slats, deep below the concrete foundation, something shimmered, like wet stone reflecting light. He tapped the metal with a wrench. A hollow sound answered him, not solid ground. He tried again, and this time, it echoed back. Not once, but twice. As if someone below had struck back. Mark stood, gripping the wrench tightly. "Hello," he called out. His voice echoed down the corridor. Then came a single, slow response, 3 taps, deliberate and heavy, like knuckles on metal. He turned and hurried back to the main platform. His hands were trembling, though he wasn't sure from fear or adrenaline. Back in the booth, he pulled up the live feed from the maintenance cameras. Most showed static, the network had been unstable for days, but one feed, labeled Tunnel 6A, was active. It showed the far end of the unused tunnel connecting to the old line. A man stood there. He wore an outdated metro uniform, dark blue jacket, cap, reflective armband, the kind used in the 1970s. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared into the camera with a blank, unlit face. Mark leaned closer. The man's badge number was visible for a split second before the screen went black. Mark replayed the footage, but when he scrolled back, the feed jumped as if part of the recording had been erased. The timestamp flickered and froze on 2:17 a.m. He looked at his watch, 2:17 exactly. He switched off the monitors and backed away from the console. The loudspeakers crackled again, this time softly. Station. Sviatotroitska, service resumed. His heart pounded. The line had been shut down since 1983. He checked the rail sensors, movement detected on the closed section, deep beyond the southern gate. The signal showed a rolling mass the size of a train moving at 14 kilometers per hour. But all the tracks there had been dismantled years ago. Mark wrote a brief report for the morning shift, leaving out the impossible details. As he packed up his tools, his coworker Andrei arrived early. Another long night? Andrei joked. Mark forced a smile. You could say that. Before leaving, he asked, "Hey, you've been here longer than me. What was under this place before the station?" Andrei hesitated. They said it was a cemetery. City moved the graves when they started digging. But you know how it goes, not everything gets moved. Mark didn't answer. He took one last look at the empty platform. The lights flickered once more, and in the reflection on the polished tiles, he thought he saw someone standing behind him. When he turned, the space was empty again. He left without locking the door to the control booth, a habit he never broke before. Later that morning, when the cleaning crew arrived, they found the loudspeaker system still running, looping a single broken announcement. Last train approaching. Sviatotroitska. Mark hadn't slept properly in days. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the echo of that distorted announcement, Sviatotroitska. It played in his head like a loop, followed by the sound of a train that didn't exist. Still, he returned to the station. He told himself it was his duty. The official opening was near, and someone had to make sure the system was safe. It was a cold, rainy night. Water dripped from his jacket as he descended the silent escalator, carrying his flashlight and a small toolkit. The air underground felt even heavier than before, damp, still, suffocating. When he reached the platform, he noticed something new, faint chalk marks on the tiles near the wall, a circle drawn around a vent with the letters ST beside it. He hadn't seen those before. Mark started his routine check, reading data from the electrical panels, recording the humidity, verifying voltage levels. Everything appeared normal until he passed the southern end of the station. There, behind a temporary barrier, stood a narrow maintenance corridor that had been sealed off. The sign read "Access Restricted, Structural Risk." For reasons he couldn't explain, he stopped. A weak vibration came from beyond that sealed door, almost like a heartbeat under the floor. Then he heard it, a distant thump, slow and deliberate. It wasn't machinery. It sounded like someone knocking. He hesitated, then removed the small cover plate over the lock and forced the door open. The corridor beyond was short and dark, ending in a rough concrete wall. The smell hit him immediately, damp soil and old dust, mixed with something like rust. He stepped inside, sweeping the light across the wall. Cracks ran through it, and from one of them leaked a faint stream of cold air. The knocking came again, louder now, from behind the wall. 3 times. Then silence. Mark leaned closer, listening. For a few seconds there was nothing, then a faint whisper, as if someone's mouth was pressed to the concrete. He couldn't make out words, only the rhythm, human, pleading. His breath quickened. "Hello," he called softly. "Is someone there?" No answer. Only a low moan of moving air. He tried to record it on his phone, but as soon as he started the camera, the sound stopped. Instead, his flashlight flickered, not randomly, but in pulses, almost like Morse code. Then the beam stabilized, and he saw something that made his throat tighten, the outline of a handprint on the concrete, pale and fresh, as if pressed from the inside. Mark stumbled backward, nearly dropping his light. His instincts screamed to leave, but something stronger, the need to know, held him there. He knelt beside the wall, tracing the edge of the handprint with trembling fingers. The surface felt cold, almost wet. And then he heard it again, a whisper, this time clear enough to form words. "Don't open." He froze. The voice was female, weak, echoing from deep below. Suddenly the ground beneath him trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling, and from one of the cracks, a small section of concrete broke loose, revealing a hollow space behind. He shone his light through the gap. Beneath the station floor was a large cavity, an older tunnel lined with crumbling bricks. The air that drifted out carried the unmistakable scent of decay. Inside that tunnel, something moved. Slow, unsteady steps. Then the sound of metal dragging across stone. Mark stumbled back and slammed the maintenance door shut. He leaned against it, heart pounding, listening as the noise faded into the distance. When he looked down, he noticed black residue on his hands, not dust, but something thicker, oily, almost like dried blood. He rushed back to the main platform and turned on the surveillance monitors. All feeds were blank except one, the southern camera, which showed static. Through the distortion, for just a moment, he saw movement, the same maintenance corridor he had just left, and a dark figure standing inside it. Then the feed cut out. He replayed the footage again and again, but the segment disappeared from the recording. He checked the system logs. There was no data between 1:07 and 1:14 a.m., as if that time simply didn't exist. At 2 a.m., he heard voices over the intercom. Not an announcement this time, but soft, overlapping whispers. Dozens of them. Male and female. Some crying, some praying. The sound came from every speaker at once. Mark turned off the main power switch to silence them, but even with the system disconnected, the voices continued for several seconds, fading only when the emergency lights flickered on. He grabbed his things and left in silence, avoiding his reflection in the dark windows as he walked past. On the surface, the city was still asleep. The rain had stopped, but his clothes were soaked through. At home, he opened the video file he had saved from the first night, the one showing the silhouette on the tracks. The footage had changed. The figure was closer now, standing at the platform's edge. And just behind it, in the darkness of the tunnel, there was another outline, a woman's face, half seen, staring directly at the camera. Mark shut the laptop and sat in silence until morning. He knew he couldn't explain it. But deep inside, he felt something certain now. There was another level beneath Podzemna 13, something not listed in any blueprint. And whatever was down there, it was waking up. The next few days passed in silence. Mark didn't tell anyone what he had seen or heard, but his coworkers noticed the change in him. He looked pale, distracted, and spoke little. He spent every night reviewing the same recordings, rewinding the footage frame by frame, trying to find a rational explanation. Each time, the images were slightly different, the shadows had moved, the angles had shifted, as if the cameras were watching something that existed only when no one was there. On the fourth night, his phone rang just after midnight. It was the control dispatcher, her voice tired and confused. "Mark, sorry to call so late. We're getting movement readings from the southern line. But that section's sealed, right?" He sat up instantly. "What kind of readings?" "Train-sized. No scheduled runs. You'd better check it out before the morning inspection." Mark arrived at Podzemna 13 half an hour later. The moment he entered, he felt it, a vibration through the floor, like distant thunder. The station lights flickered, and the display board above the platform briefly came to life. It showed one word, TROITSKA. Then it went dark again. He followed the vibration toward the south tunnel, the one that had been closed for decades. The heavy gate was already unlocked. Inside, the air was damp and cold. His flashlight beam swept over the rails, covered in dust and rust, untouched for years. But in the distance, something metallic glinted faintly. Mark stepped forward slowly, counting each echoing footstep. The tunnel curved slightly, and around the bend he saw it, an old metro car. The paint had peeled away, revealing faded blue steel. The doors stood half open. The number on the side read E214, a model retired in the early 1980s. He approached cautiously. There was no sound except for the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. The car's windows were fogged from the inside. He raised his flashlight and wiped one clear with his sleeve. For a second, his heart froze. Handprints covered the glass from within, dozens of them, smudged and streaked, like people had been trying to get out. "Hello," he called into the silence. His voice echoed down the empty line. No answer. He climbed inside. The interior smelled of dust and something faintly sweet, like old flowers left too long in a closed room. Seats were torn, floor cracked, lights dead. He walked down the aisle, his boots crunching broken glass. On one seat lay an old leather cap, the kind metro drivers used decades ago. Beneath it, a folded service badge, I. Amoros, Chief Operator, Sviatotroitska Line. Mark swallowed hard. He had seen that name earlier in the archives, the operator of the train that vanished during the 1983 collapse. The report said no remains were ever recovered. He turned to leave, but the doors slid shut behind him with a metallic slam. The entire car jolted, and the faint hum of electricity returned. The lights flickered weakly to life, bathing the cabin in a pale yellow glow. The control panel at the front blinked, showing a single green light, ready. Mark stumbled toward the exit and hit the emergency release. It didn't move. Then, from the front of the car, a crackling voice came through the old intercom, the same hollow tone he had heard from the speakers before. Next stop. Sviatotroitska. The car shook again. Outside, through the dusty windows, he saw the tunnel begin to move, or maybe it was the train. The walls blurred, the lights flickered past in quick bursts. But there was no power in that section, no rails connected to the network. Mark's breathing quickened. "This isn't real," he whispered. "This can't be real." He pressed his palms to the window, trying to see beyond the flickering light. The tunnel outside began to change, walls covered with dark stains, pipes rusted through, old posters half torn. Then, through the dim reflection, he saw them, faces. Dozens of them pressed against the glass from the outside, pale and silent. Their eyes were open but empty. The intercom clicked again. End of the line. The doors opened by themselves. A rush of cold air filled the cabin. Mark stepped out, clutching his flashlight. He stood on a narrow platform lined with decayed tiles. Above him, a cracked sign read Sviatotroitska. The place looked frozen in time, everything coated with a thick layer of dust, yet the air still moved. He took a few steps forward. In the center of the platform stood an old wooden bench, and on it, a pile of personal belongings, watches, handbags, wallets. Some still had ID cards inside. All bore the same date, 1983. Suddenly, the ground trembled again. From behind him came the sound of the train doors closing. He turned around, but the car was already pulling away, its lights fading into the darkness. He ran after it, shouting, but his voice only echoed back. When it disappeared, the station fell completely silent. Then, faintly, from somewhere deep below, came that same whispering chorus he had heard before, voices rising and fading, calling names he didn't recognize. Mark backed toward the old stairway, but it was blocked with rubble. He switched on his flashlight, the beam catching a small metal plaque half buried in the dust. It read, "In memory of the 12 who never returned." The inscription below had been scratched out, but a newer message had been carved into the metal with something sharp. "We never left." The light flickered once, then died completely. Mark stood alone in the dark, the hum of unseen rails beneath his feet. The next morning, Mark didn't come home. His neighbors assumed he was still on a night shift, but by the second day, the Metro Dispatch Office filed a report. One of their engineers hadn't checked out from the system. When investigators entered Podzemna 13, everything appeared untouched, the tools in their places, the lights off, no sign of a struggle. Yet the atmosphere underground felt wrong, thick, stale, almost electric. At 3:40 a.m., the central control hub received an automatic transmission from the maintenance channel registered to Mark's ID. It wasn't a call. It was a live audio feed, a broadcast from inside the station. The sound was faint at first, just static and the echo of dripping water. Then Mark's voice broke through. "This is Engineer Mark Havel, inspection report. I'm at Podzemna 13, South Tunnel. There's something here." His tone was steady but hollow. A pause followed, then the distant rumble of a train. "I'm recording this in case anyone ever finds it." The train came back. The recording continued for nearly 5 minutes. The noise grew louder, wheels screeching, metal grinding against metal, as though something enormous was forcing its way along sealed rails. Then his voice again, closer to the microphone, trembling now. "They weren't wrong. There's a station beneath us. It's still active. I saw it." He coughed, the sound echoing through the empty space. "They're not ghosts," he said quietly. "They never left the line. The collapse didn't kill them, it trapped them. The system kept running, down here, underneath the new one. No signal, no power, but it's alive." The dispatcher on duty tried to respond, but the channel was locked. Mark's transmission continued without interruption. The investigators who later analyzed the file confirmed there was no way for him to have transmitted from that depth. The radio range didn't reach beyond the surface. The audio turned chaotic. A high-pitched hum filled the background, followed by what sounded like multiple overlapping voices, repeating fragments of announcements, names, and station alerts. Then Mark spoke again, almost whispering. "If anyone hears this, don't open the south gate. Don't dig deeper. You'll wake them up." He paused. Then, in a calm, deliberate voice, said the final words. "The train's here. I think it wants me to finish the route." After that, there was the shriek of metal, the rush of wind, and silence. When the search team arrived hours later, they found the southern gate unlocked and the tunnel cleared of debris. The floor showed 2 fresh rail marks stretching into the dark, ending abruptly where the tunnel was supposed to be sealed. There was no sign of Mark, no trace of his equipment, and the power logs recorded a short, unexplained surge exactly at 3:47 a.m. The only item recovered was his flashlight, lying near the platform edge. It still worked. Inside the battery compartment, someone had folded a small piece of paper, a section of an old metro map, yellowed and torn. A new line had been drawn across it in pencil, connecting Podzemna 13 with Sviatotroitska. In the margin, next to the hand-drawn route, were 3 words written in shaky letters. "They're still writing." After that night, Podzemna 13 was closed permanently. The official explanation cited structural instability due to underground flooding. No one questioned it publicly. The workers who had been assigned there refused to return. Some said they still heard vibrations under the floor when they walked above that part of the city. Others swore they saw faint lights in the maintenance shafts, flickering like train headlights moving far below. Weeks later, one of the technicians checking the metro's central server noticed something unusual. A new audio file had appeared automatically in the archive, timestamped 2 days after the closure. It had no origin code. The file name read arrival_log_6a.wave. When played, it contained only a single sound, a train slowing to a stop, the doors sliding open, and a man's voice, tired, calm, and familiar, saying, "Final stop, all passengers off." Then footsteps fading away, and finally, the mechanical chime that every metro passenger knew by heart. End of recording. The metro administration deleted the file, claiming it was a corrupted test log. But the operator who first heard it quit that same week. He told his supervisor he couldn't take the night shifts anymore. When asked why, he only said one sentence before leaving his badge on the desk. "Because the trains keep running down there, and they don't come back empty." Podzemna 13 remains sealed today. The line above it operates normally, but at night, the signal boards occasionally flash a destination that no longer exists, Sviatotroitska. And every few months, just before dawn, someone at the control room swears they hear a familiar voice breaking through the static, whispering a single phrase. "Next train arriving, track 2."